Hello and welcome to Conversations with Martyn. I am Martyn, speaking to you today from Budapest, Hungary. And my guest today is Martyn Wilson, coming to us from England. London, is it? Or what city are you in?
We're just outside of London, close to Guildford.
Ah, okay. Let's say London
Yeah, it's close
for the
enough.
sake, for the sake of simplicity. Yeah. Um, my husband Gabor and I met Wilson and his wife a few weeks ago. Actually, it was a month ago now, in London, where all four of us were being interviewed on Conscious TV. And the amazing thing was that we had a dinner together with Ian McNay and Renata McNay and another couple the night before. And as soon as Gabor and I met Martyn, I'm bad with names today. As soon as we met Martyn and his wife, there was an instant recognition. It was, remember, I was telling us, like, where have I seen this face before? And we've never been in the same country at the same time, so obviously we haven't met, but there was such a recognition. And his story is amazing. It's pretty much the opposite of my story. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go on Conscious TV and watch his story. So we will cover a little bit of it today, but not too much, because I want you to really watch. Ian McNay does a fabulous job getting the story through. So please watch it when you can. So Martyn, welcome, and so good to see you again.
Oh, you too. You too.
I enjoyed that interview so much, and perhaps Gabor calls you contrarian. Remember that you had a
Yeah,
conversation with him.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and so tell us why. Tell us why he calls you a contrarian. Maybe you can summarize quickly the story of what happened to you.
I think my story is a little bit different because whereas most people set out on a spiritual path to find awareness, consciousness, enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, I approached it from a completely different direction. In as much as I was trying to disprove it, I was trying to prove that it never existed.
Mm-hmm.
And this was because my wife was on her journey, and I never believed a word of it. So I set out to make sure that I could disprove every bit of it. And somewhere somewhere along the way, while I was looking the other direction, it crept up on me, and I suddenly got it. So, very, very different. Yeah, very different.
I was so jealous. It took me 40 years. That's wonderful. And one thing, when I was listening to your video again, one thing that came to me too is that there's many people who are opposed to it and try to disprove it in their own way. But I haven't heard anyone who's had such success in actually waking up as a result of it. And so one thing that came to me because of that, and I'd like you to elaborate on this, is you were desperate. You lost your first wife, and here's your second wife, who was the love of your life. She, as you say in the tape, she was your everything, and you felt that she's being pulled away. And it sounded to me like you were torn. There was a crisis situation. And you hear a lot of people, whether they search for it or they're against it, um, usually some kind of crisis pushes them towards that goal. Would you say that was accurate in your case?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and something I don't think I actually recognised that at the time, because as I was trying to disprove it. And of course, when we're saying that I felt that I was losing Maria,
Mm-hmm.
felt that she was pulling away from me, that was all in my own mind. There was no, Maria never had that thought at all. But it's every time Maria came back from a seminar or another workshop and started telling me about enlightenment and consciousness and of course, I just jumped all over her and just discredited everything she said, absolutely every bit. But of course, the more educated she became and the more aware she became, the sillier I felt actually, and felt that she was pulling away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really, really set out to, make sure that I could disprove everything. And the strange thing is I've always been brought up to never fail at anything. You know, I have to win at every cost. And this time I failed miserably because I tried to disprove something, and it got to a point where I knew that I couldn't. I knew that I was the one that was in the wrong. And you know, with ego, one of the biggest and worst things for ego is to admit that you're wrong.
Yes.
Um, that was a difficult one. That was really, really difficult. But at the same time, I had no ego anymore. You know, that was melting away, and I had to sit down and say to Maria, this thing that you've been looking for all this time, I've suddenly got it. I've found it. And of course then Maria didn't believe me. And so whereas I felt she was pulling away from me, all of a sudden she felt that I was pulling away from her.
Oh.
Um, and thankfully we've really, really come back together now, and we've met in the middle, and we're happier than we've ever been. You know,
Wow.
everything is absolutely fantastic now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I wonder if the resistance that you had such tremendous resistance. I wonder if that is was the mind recognizing that, oh, this is something I can't win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, I was really torn inside because, you know, before the sort of ego really melted away, there was still that struggle inside of me. That you know, which way do I go here? Do I pretend that I've discredited it, or do I be truthful and say, actually, I can't win this one? And there was a real internal struggle that went on for quite a lot of months, actually. And this is before I told Maria any of this. She had no idea that any of this was going on. But I think when you finally look inside yourself, stop looking outwards is the big thing. And I loved it when Gabor said this to me during our day at Conscious TV. And he said to me, that's the big difference, is from the ego point of view, we always look outwards. From an awareness point of view, we look inwards. And of course, when you take the time to look inwards, I suddenly realized that I can't win this one. It is real. I've got to just let go now. I've got to surrender and just go with it. And, you know, that's what I did. And it's changed my life completely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you know, I think it's such an important point, because a lot of people shy away from experiences like that threaten the ego, or threaten what you think your mind should be, what your life should be like, and threaten the outward movement. But all the suffering, you know, that happens, and the pain of the fear of losing someone, or the fear of not being able to win this one, really is a means of turning inside.
And you know, it would have been so easy for the ego to have taken over, and for me to have gone the other way. It would have been so easy to do that. But as I say, when you do look inside, if you're able to look inside, you haven't got a choice. You know, there's no choice in the matter. There's no ego there to be found anymore. So when you look inside,
Yes.
you're not given that option anymore. You've just got to go with what's real. You
Right.
know, and that's what I did. But and of course, off of the back of that, the most difficult thing I've ever had to do was to sit down and explain it to Maria, and that was really, really difficult. But you know, it caused some friction. It caused some, I won't say arguments, but very tense moments in our relationship. But ultimately, it has made us stronger and closer. And you know, she really is my everything, and we just are so close now. You know, I'm so thankful for everything. I really am.
But I love what you said in the interview too. You said that you had to make sure that what you found was for real before you told her about it.
Yeah.
How did that go? How was that for you? What made it? What convinced you that this was for real?
It was strange because I didn't have a sudden awakening. I know I've read about some people that just suddenly wake up in an instant, and it wasn't like that. It was quite a gradual process. But it was the mindfulness that came in first, which is something I've never ever had. You know, my mind has always been racing. And of course, when that started gradually coming in, I had moments of silence. And when I say moments, to start with, this this was like split seconds of silence. But
Mm-hmm.
even that was a miracle to me, because I'd never had that before. And of course, I practiced a particular technique that just made those moments of silence longer and longer, until after months and months, I got to a point where my mind was just completely still. And of course, I didn't know anything about enlightenment, or I didn't know anything about the spiritual path. I had no teachings whatsoever. So to have those moments of silence, of course, the first question I asked myself was, is this it? Is this enlightenment? Have I found the end game? But do you know, when you look inside, you suddenly realize that if you've asked yourself that question, then no, you've not reached the, that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some more research, and I started looking into things. And I think then it was when I started questioning my beliefs and opinions. And from someone that had such a huge ego, I had very, very strong beliefs and opinions that no one could shake me from. Absolutely no one. And of course, when you start questioning whether, and my big question was always, I looked at any belief or opinion and asked, can I prove or disprove what I'm saying? And if I couldn't prove or disprove it, I decided to throw it away.
Oh.
And I just got to a point where I realized that every single last one of my beliefs and opinions weren't real. They were all false. So I had to throw so many things away. And again, once I'd done that, I asked the question again, is this it? But again, I'd ask the question, so I knew it wasn't it. And so I kept on searching and probing, and you guys will know this, that you do then just suddenly get to a point where there is no beliefs or opinions, there's no thoughts, there is just nothing. There's not. I mean, I used to read a lot about the observer, and when all of a sudden there's no observer, that was when I thought, wow, this is what Maria's been searching for. This is it. And an interesting conversation I had with you guys over dinner actually was the fact that, we go out on a spiritual journey looking for the end game.
Yes.
To suddenly realise that there is no end game.
What a bummer.
It never stops. There's always a new experience, and there's always something new coming along. And I'm grateful and thankful for that every single day. And because without those experiences, I don't know what the point of life is, to be honest.
Right.
So, but the end game for me really was to be happy, which I don't think I'd been for a lot of years. And I can honestly say now that I am happy. I am happy every single day. I'm grateful for absolutely everything in my life, and not just my family and friends, but I mean, meeting people like yourself and Gabor was just fantastic, because I'd never ever met anyone else that we had that instant recognition with.
Likewise.
Just so grateful for it. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing for us too. Gabor was so excited, to talk to you. I think you must have spoken for 3 hours.
Oh, I think we did.
Before,
yeah.
or something.
What's really amazing is myself and Maria had conversations, and we said, what will actually happen when we meet people in that same space? Will we actually have anything to talk about?
Yeah.
Or will we just sit and look at each other? We don't know. And of course, this proved the point that there is so much to talk about. There really is. And just sharing experiences. So I'm really grateful for meeting you guys. I love you to bits.
Oh,
So,
likewise.
Brilliant.
Likewise. And for it was wonderful too. Ian did a great thing at the end of your video. He had a panel of just you with Gabor, the two beings speaking together like that, and it was really wonderful. It's right at the end of your interview. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It was very nice to watch that connection.
Do you know the great thing is, I think Ian said, let's just go with the panel and see what happens. And he actually said to us beforehand, obviously just talk about anything you agree on, anything you disagree on, and whatever. There was absolutely no disagreement at all. Such a meeting of minds was just awesome. Absolutely awesome. So I don't think it's quite what Ian expected, but I have to say Ian is fantastic at just getting the the best out of people.
Yeah.
Really, really good. And conscious TV, as you know, is, you know, what a wonderful thing that is. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
And of course, what you're doing here as well,
Thank you.
just spreading the word is just fantastic.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's so important because there is a lot out there today. There's a lot of new age wonderful stuff, and there's a lot of new age not so wonderful stuff, and there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of hearsay, people learning stuff by hearsay, which is what I appreciate so much about your experience, because none of it is hearsay.
Yeah.
Even though it was direct experience, without book knowledge, without taking courses, it was your own experience. Even then, you were asking for proof. How do I know that this is true? And many people, like myself, for many years, just go on, oh, so and so said such and such. Okay, so the last thing that you hear, okay, now this is the new fad. And it becomes an addiction to searching.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and the goal, so to speak, is completely lost. So that I really, really appreciate that about your story, because it's so different. And the other thing that I think is so important about your experiences, you said you didn't even know, you didn't even hear the word enlightenment yet at that point.
I didn't even know what it meant.
I know, it cracks me up every time. And here I am from age 22. I'm looking for enlightenment, and this dude has never even heard of it.
Do you know what's
Meanwhile,
really funny is I
meanwhile,
actually
up.
I actually Googled it. I Googled the word to see what it meant. And it's amazing because the first thing that came up was enlightenment was they took it on as a Buddhist term.
Uh-huh.
And me being me and the big ego trying to disprove everything, that wasn't good enough for me. I needed to know more. And do you know what's really interesting is Buddhism is actually thousands of years old. And yet the first time the word enlightenment was actually used was only 300 years ago. So it's not a Buddhist term at all. But to take it, you know, you look at the Buddhist way, and of course people believe that you've got to sit on top of a mountain for 40 years meditating to find enlightenment. And of course that works for some people. So you can't discredit that. But, you know, normal everyday people are waking up now, and that they haven't done all of this stuff. They haven't sat on mountains and done all of this stuff. And I think the biggest problem that we face with other people waking up now is they do read too much, and, you know, they go to too many seminars, and all they seem to do is put more and more layers on top of themselves that at some point they will have to let go of.
Yes.
And I think the explanation for me finding it, I won't say easily, because no one understands the struggle, the internal struggle I went through for a very, very long time. But I think from the outside, it looks as if I got it so easily. And I think a lot of that is because I didn't have all of those layers. I didn't have all the teachings, and I hadn't read all the books and all of that sort of thing. So I didn't have as much to let go of.
Exactly.
So it was still difficult, but I didn't have as much to let go of. And I did actually say to someone yesterday, someone asked me about the Buddhist way, you know, if that was the right way. And I said, to be honest, I'm far too pretty to have a shaved head. So it's not they didn't agree with me.
That's great.
I do look good in orange, though.
Yes, of course. You can be a swami any day. Yeah, that's amazing. The fact that you didn't have those concepts, you absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. That spared you a lot of years, probably, of unlayering, so to speak. And the fact that you weren't familiar with concepts is also really important, because there are many words like surrender, non-duality, awakening, enlightenment, of course, that have been bastardized. They've been used and used and used. Even the word going within. A lot of people say, oh yeah, going within, I know what that's about. But they're really talking about inner thoughts or inner psychic experiences, and they call it going within, and it's not. So I wanted to discuss with you, to go over some of these terms with you, because you learned these words from your own experience, not from somebody else, not something that you read in a book. And you didn't get the bastardized versions of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, what I mean by that is so many repetitions and so many different techniques and teachings using those words in slightly different ways, to a point where seekers today don't know what the real meaning is.
Yeah.
So they bounce, they jump from one thing to the other, trying to figure out what these things are. And I think you're the most qualified person that I know, because your spirituality wasn't tainted by these concepts. So maybe we can start with awakening. What would you say is awakening?
See, awakening to me, it was a word that I used before I used the word enlightenment, because I never liked the word enlightenment. I thought enlightenment was a word that people put on a pedestal and made it into, you're almost like a superhero if you're enlightened. And of course it's not. I mean, my view on any of it is really, it's a learned behavior. From childhood, we've got this learned behavior and these belief systems and programming, that if you actually strip all of that away, enlightenment is actually underneath it. It's there.
Mm.
So again, all of these terms, awakening, enlightenment, awareness, I didn't know any of these words. So of course, if you'd have said to me 3 years ago someone had an awakening, I would have laughed at them, because that just seems so woo-woo and just so sort of airy fairy. It
Yeah.
just wasn't. It just didn't make any sense. So when you say awakening now, that is, to me, that is the realization of who you really are. That
Mm.
is, which is something I never had. I always thought I was Martyn Wilson, and then I realized that was just a name that was given to me. I thought that I was the job that I did, or I thought I was all these things. And when you actually look inside and you realize that actually I'm not, I am pure energy. That's what I am. I'm just pure energy. And the waking up and actually seeing that is awakening. That is being able, is having the ability to actually look inside and realize who you really are, who you are at the essence. So that's what awakening means to me. But before that term came up, I was listening to words like awareness and consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually thought that all of those words meant the same thing. And it was funny listening to Georgie when we went up to Conscious TV, listening to Georgie when she actually gave an explanation of what she thought those words meant. And she broke them up a little bit, a little bit more. And that actually, I took something away from that day. I went away and actually seriously thought about what she'd said. And I thought, for all of my research, I just naively, I banded all those words together into one thing. And there are layers, there are steps to take. And, to suddenly realize that consciousness was actually different to awareness. I'd never really thought about it before, but I'm sort of seeing that more. And I'm no expert. That's the thing, Youre. I'm no expert, and I'm still learning. And as I said, there's always a new experience. But so mindfulness was the first step that I took. And as I said, that I questioned, is this it? And I realized it wasn't. So again, mindfulness was one thing. Awareness is something completely different, because awareness is more to do with the heart center, really, the looking inwards at yourself, whereas mindfulness is all about the mind. So, I'm still only now starting to break these words up and make sense of it myself. But as you say, I'm making sense of it myself rather than reading a book or researching it or whatever. I need to know it's real for me. I need to know it's my truth rather than someone else's truth. So if that makes sense.
Yes. Maybe you can just, because you brought those terms of mindfulness, awareness, and consciousness, if you can give us your understanding of the difference between all those three.
So mindfulness to me was that first step that I took. So that was freeing yourself from those uncontrolled thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to sort of explain that when I say uncontrolled thoughts, I'm not talking about thinking, because you still have to think. It's just the difference is you being in control of what you think rather than the thoughts being in control of you. So, the mindfulness is that freedom, that peace of not having that internal dialect continuously running through your mind,
Right.
those negative thoughts just pouring in.
Right.
So that's it for me. The consciousness, and I think consciousness and awareness I could actually band into one from my point of view. And as I say, this is when you've moved from the mind and you've moved down into the body, into the heart center, and you start looking inwards at who you really are. And it's that that awareness of you're not that programming. You know, you're not all of these things that you've been taught as you've been growing up. You know, you really do realize well, not just realize, you accept everything exactly the way it is, and that's difficult for a lot of people to accept, because I've had questions, you know, how do you accept murderers and rapists? I'm not saying I like it or agree with it. What I'm saying is it's happening. You know, you cause so much internal just pressure and conflict inside by fighting within yourself of all of these concepts that are going on, but they are going on. You know, when you've got that acceptance of, look, this is happening, this is how the world is, when you're able to step back away from it and see it for what it is, you can deal with it a lot more effectively.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, and so again, I'm not saying that you can't try to change things, or you can't try to change the world we live in. I'm just saying, change it from a point of standing back and looking at it and seeing it for what it is, rather than being buried inside the conflict of it. You know, so that's from my point of view anyway. So I think the mindfulness, consciousness and awareness I can break up in that way. Of course, enlightenment is, as I say, I didn't even know that term 3 years ago. That's something I had to go and find. But I've come to realize that this is all of these things rolled into one. So it's the mindfulness, it's the getting rid of the debilitating beliefs and opinions, and realizing who the real I am is. And on top of that, it's the ability to actually be in your own silence, which a lot of people, and including myself, could never ever do. When you're comfortable with your own silence and you can actually be with yourself, you can be with anyone. And then the final one is obviously to be happy. So I've just actually given you the breakdown of my entire book. That was the keys to consciousness, every step along the way. But so enlightenment is all of those things rolled into one. But again, really important to, and again, from my point of view, really important to understand that there is no end game. Enlightenment is not the finish line. There is always an experience after it. There's always something else going on. So, and it's interesting because sorry, I hope you don't mind. I'm talking.
Please go ahead. I'm enjoying
it. Really, really interesting. I was giving a talk yesterday. We've got a big event just outside of London called G Live, and it was a big wellness day. So I was there giving a talk yesterday, talking about the book and my experiences. And there was a young lad that came up to me, and he said that he'd had awakening experiences that sounded so similar to my own, but he said, unfortunately, after maybe a few days, his ego would come back in, or the thoughts would come back in, and it would melt away. And then he had this constant struggle to try and win it back again. And I think from my point of view, the more you want and need something, the further away it gets. So the more you want and need enlightenment, the further away it gets. But the really interesting thing is when I asked him after these awakening experiences what he was doing, he was going away and reading another book or watching another seminar or doing something to make sense of that awakening experience. And by doing that, he just put another layer on top of himself and another set of beliefs and opinions. So we had a really, really long chat, and hopefully he's going to sort of maybe take a different path now, you know, and maybe take a different route to look at his own truth rather than trying to learn someone else's truth. So, you know, as I've said all along, with what's happened to me, if I only ever help one person, if I can share this with one person, that's mission complete. You know, that's done. And so maybe I've done that. Maybe that's happened. So watch this space. We'll see. We'll see.
I'm sure you're going to help a lot more people than one. Your experience is so potent and so important as well. Um, I'm sure it will help a lot of people. Um, another question I want to ask you, what would you say to another Martyn? Like if you met someone who was a contrarian like you, pretty rare, but you never know. What would you say to somebody like that? What advice would you give them?
Do you know, it's so difficult to actually give advice to someone that's in such a massive ego state, because the ego doesn't take advice. It doesn't listen to anything other
Yeah.
than its own internal dialect. So interestingly, you'd think that I would be able to, because I've experienced the massive ego and now I've experienced where I am now, you'd think that it would be easier for me to interact with people on both sides. And I'm actually finding that I can't do that. My short-term memory is completely got. I've got nothing worth remembering, to be honest. But it's just so shot now. I can't actually remember what it was like to be in that ego. I know I was there, and I can talk to you about it, but I can't remember the feelings. I can't remember what it was like to actually be that
Mhm.
big ego. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I look back now and it's almost as if I'm looking at a completely different person. So to be honest, I don't know if I could give advice to
Mhm.
someone in that ego state.
Mhm.
But of course, if it was someone that was someone that was on that path looking for answers, then my advice to them would be find your own truth. Don't follow anyone. Interestingly, we had a question come up yesterday was about which path to take, because we had a lady that was she's very highly religious. We had another lady that's been on the spiritual path for many years,
Mhm.
and then a guy that had a very sort of scientific brain, and they were sort of got into a little bit of, not an argument but a discussion over which was the correct path to take.
Mhm.
And of course my outlook on that was, if you've I'm not religious, still don't consider myself spiritual, believe it or not, and I'm certainly not an academic. I'm not scientific.
Mhm.
But of course, if you do actually read the Bible, at no time does it say that Jesus said follow me.
That's right.
Buddha never said follow me. Einstein, I mean, not being funny, Einstein couldn't say follow me because he didn't know where he was going himself. But none of these people said follow me.
Right.
And of course, when you look at all of those paths, the religious path, when we talk about God, I used to see God as being a separate being, sort of up in the sky somewhere.
Yeah.
And of course, when you read the Bible and it says that God is everywhere, well, that's because it's us. It's the energy that is everywhere and everything.
Mhm.
If you look at the spiritual path, we are talking about the energy that is everywhere and it's everything. And of course, the scientific path, if you look at quantum physics and things like that, we're talking about energy that's everywhere and everything.
Right.
It doesn't matter which path you take. It makes absolutely no difference because all paths lead to exactly where you stand.
Yes.
That's the realization that I've come to. And to be able to say that to someone is awesome. It's absolutely awesome to make them realize that you look around in different parts of the world and people are fighting wars over this because their path doesn't match someone else's path. They just don't realize that all of those paths will ultimately lead to the same place.
Yeah.
That would be my advice anyway. Find your own truth. Don't follow anyone else.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Since you mentioned your book, can you show us your
Yeah.
book? You have it there? Yes. Beautiful. Enlightenment, the keys, called Enlightenment, the keys to consciousness.
The keys to consciousness. Yeah.
Yes.
And you'll notice on the bottom of the book, I actually put written and experienced by Martyn
Exactly.
Wilson, because I wanted people to understand. I go on a lot about not following other people and not reading the next book and the next this, that, and the other. It was important for me to make people understand that this was my truth. This
Yes.
is my story, my truth. This is not a textbook. This is
Yes.
not something for people to learn from. It's really saying to them,
Hmm.
find your own path, find your own truth. So
Yeah.
that's why I put written and experienced by Martyn Wilson, just to make sure everyone realised that this was my truth and not theirs.
Mm. Yeah. Wonderful. In the interview with Ian, you also talked a little bit about surrender and acceptance.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I believe you said people talk about universal love, and whereas you prefer the term acceptance, and you talked about
yeah,
surrender. And one of the things that Gabor and I have come to see is that, as you said before, it's very difficult um, to cultivate those things, to cultivate surrender, and to cultivate acceptance or allowing. But once you've gone within, those things happen naturally. Would you
yeah.
say that was your
I,
experience as
I,
well?
I totally agree. And you know, in the book, when I talk about the keys to consciousness, so you know, for me, the keys to consciousness were the steps that I took. You know, the actual natural steps that I could see. And I think I said to Ian that the first step, mindfulness, and then the second step was questioning your beliefs and opinions. And of course, the third step, when it came to surrender, and I said to Ian, even though it was the third step, I had absolutely no control over that whatsoever. And I'm not even sure that there is a way to, as you said, to cultivate that. I don't think there is. I think this is something that happens very, very naturally
Hmm.
once the other things are in line. It's almost like getting all of your ducks in a row
Yes.
before this happened. So the surrender, when that came, was awesome. It was the most awesome thing I've ever known, to finally let go of everything, you know, to just to absolutely let go of everything. Nothing matters anymore. That is absolutely awesome. And of course, when people talk about enlightenment, and you've probably been asked the same questions. Do you walk around all day in this blissed out state? And
I wish.
I'd love to. I'd love to walk around and just see rainbows all day long. It doesn't work like that. But of course, you know, when even though that surrender is absolutely awesome, it becomes part of your everyday life. It becomes very normal very quickly.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't walk out blissed out all day, but I do walk around grateful all the time for everything. Absolutely grateful for everything. Which that sounds quite hippie, actually, does it? It sounds really 70s, but um,
Well, it's another it's a gratefulness is also another thing that people do try to cultivate because they're supposed to. A spiritual person is
yeah,
supposed to be grateful, and there's so much talk about, oh, for law of attraction you have to show gratitude. Gratitude is everything, and but the problem is it's not real unless it comes from within.
that's right.
Would you
Yeah,
agree?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, again, the more you want and need gratitude, the further away it gets. You can't want and need gratitude. You've got to be really grateful. You've got to be truly
Yeah.
grateful, and you can only be that by looking inwards. You know,
Yeah.
by looking inside. And unfortunately, most people miss that part. And as you say, they go out and they try and cultivate gratitude. I don't think you can. From my experience, I don't think you can.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the hearsay. We read in books that you're supposed to be. You're
Yeah, that's
supposed to
right.
be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if you're not awake, if you haven't gone within, what do you do with that? You know,
Well,
how do you be?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's it. That's part of the programming again. You know, I know people are so desperate to go out and find this inner peace, but unfortunately, they're so desperate that the desperation is keeping them from it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I did have one lady say to me, well, you know, I am desperate to get it. So what should I do? And my only question to her was, look at your life right now. Look at your family and your friends and everything you've got around you. Are you grateful for all of those things? And she said, absolutely. I said, so if nothing in your life changed from this point, how bad would it be? And she said, well, it wouldn't be bad at all. I said, then be grateful for it and stop searching. This lady's now found an inner peace. So
Oh.
I won't say enlightenment, but she has found an inner peace because she's accepted where she is. She's fallen back in love with where she is.
Yeah.
And you know, that's an awesome place to be. And if, you know, if the rest of it unfolds from that, then fantastic. If it doesn't, she's got a wonderful life. You know,
Yeah.
so it, just let go of the desperation. Really,
Yes.
it's going to keep you away from what you're searching for.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay. In your interview with Ian McNay on Conscious TV, he Ian brought Maria to the set for the last portion, and I remember her saying that you've never lost your humanity in spite of this experience. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and I think I did explain to Ian that one of the great myths of enlightenment is that people lose their identity, lose their humanity. And I think this comes back to we talk a lot about dropping our beliefs and opinions and all of the social conditioning that we've built up over the years. And of course, we identify that as being who we really are.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, to drop all of that, the belief is that we would lose our identity and we would lose the person and the personality that was underneath it. And of course, that's not what's happened with me at all. That's not my truth in the slightest.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we spoke earlier, and I said to you that I've always been a joker. You know, and I always jump out of bed in the morning and crack a joke. I'm definitely a morning person because I'm never miserable anyway. But I get out of bed in the morning and I'm just cracking jokes constantly, and that's how it is all day. And that's still the same. You know, that's never ever changed.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that did change is that I've got a very sensitive side, and you know I can sit down and watch a movie, and I can be in floods of tears at it. And this is something that's not new. This has always been there, but I've
Mm-hmm.
hidden it away. I've hidden it for years because my ego wouldn't allow other people to see a
Mm-hmm.
weaker side of me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, that doesn't matter anymore. You know, that's part of who I am, and if people see it, fine. And if they, you know, if they ridicule it, that's fine. I've got no problem with that now. So, but I'm still the same personality. I'm still the same. You know, the same. I've got the same mannerisms, and the jokes are still as bad as they always were. So yeah, I've never lost that. I've not lost the essence of who I really am.
That's wonderful. And how would you give us an example of how you've been able to integrate what you've become internally with your day-to-day life?
I'd say actually it's probably been one of the most difficult things because to start with, obviously I've come from a place of being a very big ego to suddenly not having that at all. And you think that, you know, I'd be able to interact with either side now. And it's very, very difficult to interact with people that are in that illusion.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wrote in the book was that one of the most amazing things, or one of the most surprising things about my awakening was realizing that everyone else was still asleep.
Mm.
And you know, and you guys will probably find the same thing, that when you walk around in your day-to-day life, people are
Yeah.
walking around like zombies. They have no idea that they're trapped in this illusion.
Mm.
And you know, sometimes I feel like just shaking people actually just to see if I can wake them up, but I know I can't. You know,
Mm.
the only way they can wake up is by finding their own path.
Mhm.
Not something I can do for them. They've got to find their own way. So I have found it quite difficult interacting with other people. And I think I said to you before that, you know, I've got a difficulty with sort of close family and friends because they still have no idea that any of this has happened. They
Yeah.
know that something is different. They just don't know what it is, and because they don't, same as me, they had no idea what a spiritual path was, or what awakening or enlightenment was. You know, they're where I was 3 years ago. They have no idea that any of this exists, and I still don't know how to explain that. I don't know how to put it across, and I've just decided not to. I've just decided to carry on, and of course, with all the interviews, you know, obviously with yourself and on Conscious TV, with all of this stuff being out there, sooner or later, they are going to see it, and they are going to come, and they're going to ask questions, and I'm
Mm.
quite prepared to answer that when it comes. Um, but I don't want to. I don't want to look like a preacher. Actually, just go to them and say, "This is how you should live your life." You know, it's not like that at all. So we'll see. We'll see. Whatever comes, comes. And you know, I sort of I'll look forward to that day and take it a day at a time.
Mhm. That's wonderful. And if there was one very important message that you want to get out there to society, to humanity, what would that be?
I think the ultimate message would have to be, don't follow someone else's path or someone else's truth.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to find your own inner peace is to find your own path and your own truth. And as we said earlier, you know, it doesn't matter which path that is, whether it's a religious, a spiritual, or a scientific path. All of those paths ultimately lead to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't follow someone else. You know, you can't follow a particular religious leader or a particular teacher, a spiritual teacher, or you know, you've got to find your own path.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds quite strange from a person that's written a book, and you know, I'm obviously putting the book out there. But as I said earlier, on the front of the book it says written and experienced by Martyn Wilson, and it's, you know, the essence of the book is find your own truth. This book is my truth. This is my story, my path. You've got to find your own path and your own story. You know, this book is just really, if anything, the book is giving you the permission to let go of everything else and find your own way. That's what it's doing. So, and hopefully, you know, that will make a difference. You know, I do hope that if I can only help one person, mission accomplished. You know, that's job done.
Yeah. That's fabulous. Yeah, I'm sure it will. And it's wonderful that, you know, with Conscious TV and other interviewers, there's so many stories of how people get there. You know, yours, of course, is exceptional because you went the back road. But everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got their own way of getting there. The main thing is, of course, to follow your heart. And I do
Absolutely.
highly, yeah, I encourage people to see your video, your interview on Conscious TV, because there at the end you actually walk people through the technique that helped you wake up. It's a wonderful technique. It's called the fish tank. It's at the end it's almost at the end. After that, you have your wonderful conversation with Gabor. But that walking people through that will help them find a way. Again, it's a way, and if it works for anyone, that's wonderful. But it's highly valuable to watch. And I also recommend people to get your book. So thank you very much, Martyn, for sharing your fabulous story and your insights with us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I have. I enjoy every conversation with Martyn because it's always new and it's always exciting. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the day or the night wherever you are on the globe, and find your own way. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Nourit.